Today, this video is coming to you from my house, and we're going to talk about enzymes. So I've made this little enzyme. It's a protein. And an enzyme's job is to speed up reactions. And so they have this special place in them called the active site. And the active site is where our reactions are going to take place. So let's say we have a substrate. Green will represent substrate. Substrate is just the thing that binds in an enzyme. So it's the reactants in any chemical reaction. Right? So example, if this enzyme was lactase, the substrate would be lactose because lactase's job is to break down lactose. Right? So our substrate is going to bind in the active site, okay? And every enzyme has a specific substrate for it. So it's like a lock and key where this particular substrate is the only one that will fit in this particular enzyme, right? So there's lots of different enzymes. So while this substrate is in here, a reaction is going to happen that's going to turn them into a product. Okay, so maybe our substrate was broken into two pieces. Sometimes our substrate is two pieces and they become one, right? So these will represent our product. I'll put our little substrate in there. On the back, you can see there's another spot over here called an allosteric site. The allosteric site is just anywhere that's not the active site. Could be over here, it doesn't matter where it is. Okay. And back here, other things can bind. So what we're going to have bind in our allosteric site is a cofactor. And the cofactor is usually like zinc or something, copper, usually some kind of element you'd find on the periodic table. It can be bigger than that, but its job is to kind of help strengthen this bond here. So when the cofactor binds, the enzyme and the substrate fit together even tighter. Okay, so a reaction could still take place without our cofactor. It would just be an even faster, stronger reaction with the cofactor in the allosteric site. Let's move our substrate out. There are some molecules that part of their shape is the same as a substrate, so they can actually fit in the active site too. And they are called, write it over here, competitive inhibitors. So because it fits in the active site, it's competing with the substrate for that site. So really, let's move our product out of here. Really, it's just a matter of who gets there first. If the substrate gets there first, the reaction happens. If the competitive inhibitor gets there first, the reaction doesn't happen. It doesn't matter how much substrate you add, right? Nobody can get in there. Whoops, that went in. Nobody can get in, okay? So all these substrates have to stay outside because the active site is taken up by our competitive inhibitor. Let's move him over here. We'll leave our products in the picture. Now, if something can bind in the active site that's not our substrate, that means something can probably bind in the allosteric site too that's not our cofactor. And indeed it can. And this is a non-competitive inhibitor. Whoops, I can spell, I swear. That's probably still wrong. Our non-competitive inhibitor is non-competitive because it's not competing for the active site. What's going to happen when a non-competitive inhibitor binds is it actually changes the shape of the active site. So now the substrate doesn't even fit. It can't even bind. So no reaction can happen whatsoever, right? So let's put it back. right? It's also important to note that if a substrate is already in the active site, the enzyme can't do any more work, right? No matter how much substrate we add, it can't get in there. So you're kind of like the enzyme at your job, and the substrate is the work you need to do. Well, if you're actively doing work, you can't do all this other work until you finish this work, right? So it doesn't matter how much work your boss gives you, you're still not going to be able to do more because you're busy doing the previous work. And so when an enzyme is full, we may have multiple enzymes, their active sites are all used up. We call that saturated. Meaning, hey, I'm doing all the work I can. So when your boss tries to give you more work, just tell them you're saturated.